Okay, let's get Chris into the show. Let's get his thoughts on what's going on in the market. Chris, I'm calling you in right now. The 10-year is dropping. Let's take a look at that as soon as we get this in, and then we'll see where that's going. Chris, good morning. How are you?
Listen, if I interrupt once in a while, it's because I'm doing a nice push. I'm sitting on the pot. But don't worry, I usually do my best thinking while I'm in
here. Okay, I'm happy that's how you consume the content. I want to get your take on just the broader market based on what we heard yesterday. Obviously, we saw Trump was inaugurated, and it looks like we do have some animal spirits. 10 years at 4.58%. Bullish or bearish over the next couple months with Trump as our new president?
So this is where volatility is going to be like the name of the game. I mean, this guy does things based on literally just, hey, I feel like this is happening, and then he throws like a bomb out there. So there's not a lot of predictability. So this is where you have to just weigh the market and the opportunities in the stocks against that. So here's an example. When you look at like where we are in the current market cycle, like valuation wise, we're pretty up there, right? So if you're following things that are like high in beta, like beta closer to 1, you're going to experience huge volatility in your portfolios. But if you find things that are low beta, you're actually in a better shape to not deal with that volatility. So I don't know how people are playing it in their portfolios, but right now everyone should be adjusting the risks in their portfolio to basically mitigate for that move up and down in beta. So, for me right now, I'm looking at all the opportunities where the policies are going to end up benefiting the underlying sector. So here's an example, like the cruise lines are riding high today. Well, one of the reasons why is because, Trump said we're going to drill, baby, drill, we're going to pump oil. Well, if you look at how much the overall overhead cost for cruise lines and airlines are, a lot of them come from, the price of oil and gas and like bunker fuels that these giant ships they run on, right? So if you're telling me that you're going to get lower pricing on fuels, that's perfect, because that means that now you have an administration that's literally going to be benchmarking their success based on keeping energy prices low, which is a huge healthy margin boost for the cruise lines. That's why you're seeing cruise lines ride up.
Right.
So I think what happens is people you have to look at industries in a way where, yes, there are direct beneficiaries, but then if you take one step away, you're like, okay, who else is going to benefit from this, right? So like one of the plays that I'm making right now is in energy infrastructure. So like Trump is saying, we want to drill, baby, drill. Well, who's drilling? Who are going to be the people that provide the drills,
Right.
So that's why you're seeing Schlumberger rise, right? It's bad for people that are in the upstream, because that means that the future prospects of higher energy prices are a lot lower, right? Which means that if you are an upstream producer of oil, it's not that great for you. But if you're a supplier of, equipment or rental equipment, bro, that's perfect for you, because that means that now there's going to be all these companies drilling for more oil, and you're going to benefit from that. So that's why you got to follow Stephen Fiorello. Stephen nailed SLB. Like if you're not following that guy, dude, I would say you probably get more value from following Steve than following me on certain things.
No, I agree. Steve has a knack for finding a lot of because he looks at balance sheets all day, right? So
the only problem with Steve is that he doesn't pull the trigger hard enough.
I agree. Okay, so I want to get your take then on that Tesla, because you had some comments on that. So Piper Sandler's using PE instead of their traditional DCFs to value them. 2 questions. Number 1, why is Tesla down 3% in your opinion today? And then 2, is that bearish or bullish that they're changing their valuation method?
Okay, here's a question. What's Tesla's current PE ratio?
201.4.
Okay, now factor in PE growth 100% for the next 5 years. What would be the PE ratio
then? Meaning it compresses by 100% over the next 5 years, right?
Correct.
That would be, so we go to 100, then 50, then it'll be in the 20s, basically in the teens. Right.
So if your growth prospect is, hey, I think Tesla is going to grow its earnings 100% year over year, that is what you're paying for with Tesla today. That's why people are like, wait a second, I'm paying for all this growth up front, and I'm assuming really, really high levels of growth. But at the same time, you look at its revenues, and revenues are flatlining, right?
Right.
So if if your idea is, hey, somehow Tesla is going to become more profitable going forward, then that's something to keep in mind. So from a valuation standpoint, they're just saying like, hey, if they're able to achieve earnings growth in the latter, like 22 years or whatever, then the PE ratio absolutely makes sense to buy it today. But if you don't think that's going to be the case, and that, these bots and this other stuff, their profitability is not going to be nearly as high, then that's something to, weigh that against Tesla. So
I think that's a fair case, because if you're buying it at these levels, you believe in exponential growth that's coming from FSD and robotics. So the PE should compress. I think that's a fair case. But if it doesn't happen, then that means you were just wrong on the growth story if you're buying Tesla here. I think that's fair.
Right. So you're basically, like you said, you're basically making a bet that Elon gets Optimus right. He gets the FSD thing right. And that ends up leading to higher margins for Tesla. So even if your revenues do compress, or at least they don't grow nearly as much, if your margins expand, then the PE is justified, right? One of the things about Tesla is that they've been spending a lot of money on CapEx in building out infrastructure for Texas. And I think, did they already start with Mexico, like the battery thing over there? And this, like Germany, there was another one. So Tesla definitely has room where it could cut back on CapEx and end up gaining profitability. The question is, they're pushing down market also with their cars. That could be something to keep in mind as well. So like I said, it's all about how Tesla can generate more profitable revenue going forward. I mean, I think that they absolutely can via their infrastructure with charging, and then also with their service centers, right? Like if you right now have a Tesla car, you big into a service center and you have to pay an X amount of money, that's all high margin revenue for Tesla. That's how all the big automakers, that's how they make their money. They don't really make a lot of money selling the cars. They make more margin on the service that they end up providing, the underlying. And the thing is, with Tesla, you get vendor lock-in, which is a really good thing for them, because that means that, there's not a lot of places that can repair certain aspects of a Tesla. Like you can take a regular car to a garage, but most of the time with a Tesla, you can only really take it to a Tesla service center. And whatever the Tesla service center said you have to pay, you got to pay.
Right. Okay. Are you following Nancy into Google, Amazon, or NVIDIA today?
More like Nancy's following me into these things, bro. Yeah. No, I think the growth story for Google is really was overshadowed by this whole legislative thing with the DOJ, but you saw like the prominent level of attention that Google pretty much got at the inauguration. With Pichai was there, but also Sergey Brin was there.
Yeah,
which was one of the things. But absent was Microsoft, which was kind of surprising. So, I think Google is turning a new leaf.
Why do you think that? Why do you think Nadella wasn't there?
I don't know. I really don't.
That is kind of weird.
Sam,
one theory I had is the people that weren't there were the ones partnering with the AI startups like Nadella, and the people that were there were the ones that kind of control AI in its current day.
I don't know why Nadella wasn't there. I mean, honest, like he was there. Microsoft was, as far as I know, Microsoft was the only one of the big tech companies that was there. I mean, Elon was there for Tesla, right? Zuck was there for Meta. Bezos was there for Amazon. Pichai and Brin were there for Google. So it's like, I don't know. It was such a weird thing to see. I know Jensen wasn't there, but I'm sure that's because Jensen's like, I don't need to kiss nobody's ring, motherfucker. I'm NVIDIA. Like when you have that kind of power, you don't need to kiss anyone's ring. The other guys are like, I'm being investigated. I need to kiss the ring before the DOJ comes and tries to break me up.
Yeah.
All right. So overall, okay. So last question here. This 10-year is falling, but we do have tariffs that every time Trump mentions it, he said February 1st, we have 25% tariffs. We get a spike on the dollar and the 10-year. How do you think the market's going to internalize his tariff vocabulary?
So I was trying to listen to Scott Bessent to figure out, what the logic behind the tariffs is versus what the end goal is. Remember, the Trump administration, they need a weaker dollar. If the goal is to close the trade deficits with countries, you're not going to do that by having a strong dollar and a weak currency on the opposite side, right? If you want the Europeans to buy more American shit, they're not going to spend crazy amounts of currency on that, where they have to convert things to a dollar. Because I mean, think about it: if the dollar's strong, that means you're paying more for a same good or service that they could get somewhere else. So this is where, even though technically speaking, the tariffs are a bad thing, there are other things that might be counterweighing. So as an example, one of the theories that I have, I know a lot of people are saying, well, you know, with all these deportations and also like, you know, shutting down the border, that means that there's going to be labor shortages. And if we have labor shortages, inflation is going to spike. But the real thing that people need to consider is that, look, if you look at the undocumented immigrant population, especially the new arrivals, I think based on the employment surveys, they would say about 3 out of 4 actually work. The other quarter don't really work. So if you're deporting the people that are not really working or adding to the productivity, you're basically taking out a lot of demand for goods and services. And the thing is, like, the counterpoint is, yes, you're taking away some of the labor pool, but you're also taking away a lot of demand. So one of the things that I was researching is how much the government actually spends more on immigrant services, like providing housing and food and shelter and, you know, healthcare and everything. And I remember the DOGE report that Elon and Vivek released last month over the amount of money that the immigrants, like illegals, pay in taxes, because, you know, they do pay taxes via sales and, you know, property and all the other non-income related taxes. The government ends up spending about $150 billion more than they take in.
Right.
So if you're able to kind of reduce that down, what you're doing is essentially cutting government expenses, right? So yes, there's going to be some shock to the labor participation. I mean, to like labor here and there, but at the same time, you also have government spending coming down. And if government spending comes down, that means that that's bullish for inflation, because that means that inflation will come down along with it. Like, I think you really have to subscribe to the Milton Friedman theory that most of inflation actually comes from just extended government expenditure. So if the talk around the Trump administration is, we're going to be a lot more sensible about spending money, and we're not going to spend it on all this extra frivolous stuff that we don't need to do it on, then that means that that's less money that's going to be circulated in the economy, which should lead to, you know, some level of disinflation.
Correct.
I think the bond market
Correct.
is recognizing that.
Correct. I agree. No, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot. And you mentioned last week a lot of different disinflationary things we have, whether it's AI, China, etc. And
you want to know something that I found to be like probably the basically that pinpoint that I needed to hear. Did you hear the thing with the HUD secretary that during his confirmation process? Basically, Elizabeth Warren said, "Look, there's a huge problem with home affordability, right?"
Right.
To the HUD secretary, and so the HUD secretary, so Elizabeth Warren's like, "I know right now you're spending $70 billion a year. How much more do you need?" And so the guy says, "No, I don't need more money. I just need to figure out ways to spend it better." Right? And Elizabeth Warren was like, "What? What do you mean you don't like? No, you have a problem. You need to spend more money." And I love the guy's response. Like, no, we need to be more efficient. Like, we are at all-time highs on how much money is going towards HUD, and we're not getting the results. That doesn't mean that we're throwing money at the problem is going to fix it. We need to figure out how to actually utilize the existing resources to get people the services that they need. I mean, this is one of the great things about DOGE right now that's coming out, is that people are really like looking interdepartmentally, like, where is the waste? Where is the you know, the fat that can be trimmed from budgets? This is not a situation where, you know, just throwing money at a problem is going to fix it. And what does that mean? That means that, once again, government spending goes down. And if government spending goes down, that should naturally help inflation come down also.
Correct.
Based on what Milton Friedman says, which I 100% agree with. You know?
Right. It's a fair point. It's a fair point. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you later. But yeah, we are getting a little bit of a sell-off right now, so it does seem like markets.
How's SMCI doing?
Oh, this SMCI thing. You, Steve, and
Brother,
Matt love this thing. That's up 3%.
That one is the one to watch out for in the next couple of weeks, mainly because there's two really big catalysts on the horizon for these guys. Number one, you already saw the mega cap companies. They announced that they were going to spend X amount of money on CapEx, and the CapEx amount is pretty substantial, right? The reason why is because all of these big guys, they're going to be making a crap ton of money on inferencing, right? So basically, when you utilize ChatGPT and all this other stuff, and you utilize more compute intensive applications, you're going to need more resources. Now, where's that resource coming from? That's coming from something called inferencing. Inferencing requires more and more GPUs in these data centers. So SMCI is one of the biggest companies among the hyperscaler vendor partners like Dell and HP, and then you have SMCI. And SMCI has like some proprietary stuff with cooling and all this other stuff. Their biggest challenge was that short report, and I went through the short report with Matt and with Steven and one of our other friends. I think you were there. Were you there?
No, I was streaming Jensen that day, and that's why I wasn't there.
Okay, gotcha. So basically, we discussed and we said, look, at the worst, these guys were aggressively recognizing revenue, but that's not something that's like fraud, right? It's one thing if you have a product that's out there that's a completely fraudulent product that you're selling to people, and it's another thing if you're basically accounting for, certain shipments that are maybe 1 week or 2 weeks ahead of the schedule on when your quarter ends and stuff like that. So there's definitely things that from an accounting standpoint that these guys probably have to work on. But dude, if you're in hyper growth mode, you have like an international logistics system, your accounting department is eventually going to have to, adjust itself and catch up. Most of the time, companies will do that behind the scenes. These guys got caught off guard with it, and the short report came out at the worst time, and then EY kind of dumped them. So that kind of like drew a lot of negative attention towards them. But I think that, in my opinion, could probably be fixed over the next 6 to 12 months. And so once the trust comes back and the numbers start showing that, hey, these guys are actually making really, really good money, there's an asymmetric risk opportunity for this thing to get much higher because just where they are in the current AI ecosystem.
What is your price target on these guys end of year?
To be honest with you, I don't know, man. It's going to be driven by market sentiment more than it's going to be driven by real valuation, because it's all about trust, right? Like the other thing, Kramer said to sell. So, bro, if Kramer says sell, I'm a buyer. I mean, I'm sorry, Inverse Kramer's been too profitable to not do. I feel like sometimes he does it just to fuck with us.
He definitely does.
Do you ever get that feeling?
Oh, of course, 100%. I get it. My thing on SMCI, and I haven't done as much research as you, I still don't trust management yet, and that's why I'm just like, what, I'll stay away. But I can understand saying, what, management is whatever. They're going to grow with NVIDIA. I get that point.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that they highlighted in the short report about double dealing with companies that they work with, somebody called Abelcom. It's controlled by the CEO's brother, and they have an interest in that company. So it's kind of a weird, from a governance standpoint, it doesn't feel right. But that's how Asian business kind of works, where it's a family operation where one guy does this and that's your exclusive supplier. You know how it is. So it's a cultural thing, in my opinion. At least that's what I'm thinking. And I think these things are, in the short term, going to, of course, plague the share price. But if they get resolved and they're actually able to show healthy numbers, and then the auditor, the new one that they took on, which is a pretty big auditor, BMO is actually pretty big. They're the 5th largest auditor. Behind, I think, behind who was it? PwC. So it's not a small auditor that took them on. If they get cleared by them and everything goes across okay and the report comes out nice and clean, this thing should shoot up very nicely in the next few weeks. So we'll see. I mean, by the way, this is a speculative thing. So this is not something that I would say, okay, yeah, just dump all your money and this is going to go up. No, understand that there are some serious risks around delisting that these guys could end up facing if they don't correct their situation and do it by February 25th.
Right.
But I have enough confidence in these guys to get the job done, so I don't mind taking the bet.
Yeah, kind of only put in what you can be willing to lose on something this speculative.
Exactly.
One last headline for you, Chris. I just got this right here. This was my take when this news dropped. I'm curious what your quick take is on this. Hindenburg's Nate Anderson could face securities fraud charges through an allegation with Anson Hedge Fund, revealed by court documents.
Do you think that's why this guy hung it up at 38 years old and decided to?
No, man. Everyone, short sellers are hated, man. Like, dude, I'll sometimes come out and say, like, I don't want to invest in a company. I'll get hate thrown at me. So imagine coming out and being against a company. How much hate gets thrown your way, you know? And bro, the risk reward for short sellers is actually terrible. It's really, really
Yeah, because you can only make 100%. That's your max profit.
Right, but on the other side, you could lose way more. I mean, just ask Chanos, man. Chanos with his Tesla short, that freaking crushed him.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
So to be a short seller, you gotta have some balls, man. And I've never seen a short seller have lasting power. Like you'll never see a Warren Buffett type short seller.
Right.
You know,
right?
How many guys do you know that actually made money shorting the market continuously? Like, yeah, you'll have these Ray Dalio type events, and you know where you can short like mortgage-backed securities right before the bottom falls out. But those are like far and few between things. I mean, then you've got like what's his name, Ackman. Remember Ackman shorted Herbalife, and he got absolutely destroyed, not because Herbalife was a garbage company, but because activists on the other side got involved and fucked over his short position. So same thing happened with the guys, what's his name, from GameStop, you know. So this is where there's so much risks to being short on things and then also being public about it. Back in the day, people saw short sellers as crusaders against bad practices, but now they're seen as villains. And I think being a villain, just some people can hack it, some people can't, and it ends up really weighing on your mental health and stability and everything else. So, you know.
That's fair.
Yep.
All right, Chris's Twitter in the chat. Thank you, brother. We will talk to you
Take care.
later. Thank you, bro.
Have a good one.
Have a good one.